Good morning and welcome to day 2 of our remote learning. Today we're going to talk about different types of observations. And so we categorize or group observations in 2 ways. So I want you by the end of class today to be able to describe what quantitative and qualitative observations are and how to record them. The 2 different types of observations that we have are quantitative, can also be considered data. Quantitative data is data recorded with numbers. So if you make measurements, if you measure the mass or volume, excuse me, of an object, you're collecting quantitative data. Those are quantitative measurements. Excuse me. We also have qualitative data or observations, and these are words that we would use to describe a substance or an object. Okay, so you either look at measurements in numbers, that's quantitative, or you look at using descriptions in words, that's qualitative. So here's an example. So Mr. Taylor was heating a test tube with 40 grams of baking soda over a Bunsen burner to see how much gas would be released. He collected 350 milliliters of carbon dioxide in an inverted collecting tube. The baking soda began as a fine grain white powder and by the end had browned and become chunky. So this is an example set of observations, and we're going to try to decide which of these observations are qualitative, are based on descriptions, and which ones are quantitative, based on numbers. I can figure out how to run this. So the observations, again, what were qualitative words, what were quantitative numbers? So the qualitative statements in that example were that baking soda, powder, was a fine grain white powder, and that baking soda had browned and become chunky when heated. Those are the qualitative statements. They're describing the substance before and after the experiment. And then there were quantitative observations in there too. There were numbers that represented some of the observations. So Mr. Taylor had initially started with 40 grams of baking soda, so that's quantitative, represents how much he had. And then when he was done, he had collected 350 milliliters of carbon dioxide. Again, that's quantitative. It's a number to describe what had happened during his lab experiment. I hope these notes were easy to understand, and you're going to be making some observations in a lab that we have set up in the classroom for you. Good luck.